Heading into this fight, a lot of people expected Joanne Calderwood to get another win, keep herself busy, and then earn a title fight with Valentina Shevchenko. Unfortunately for her, it didn't end up working out that way. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to break down the whole sequence, starting with her getting the takedown all the way to her getting finished by armbar, and talk about what she did wrong and what Jennifer Maia did right for the fight to go this way. So the sequence starts off with Jennifer Maia throwing a front kick up the middle. She threw a front kick up the middle to Joanne Calderwood's face. It skipped there for some odd reason. But Calderwood caught the kick, and then after catching the kick, decided to go for the takedown up against the fence, and ended in a pretty good spot here. From there, she looked to go to knee on belly initially. Wasn't really driving off of her foot here, though. It looked as though her knee was on the mat, or her right knee was on the mat. Typically, you want the foot on the mat so you can drive off the foot into Maia. Sort of loses that here. Keeps following Maia. For the most part, initially off the takedown, it looked as though Jennifer Maia wasn't looking to settle off of her back and fight off her back. It looked as though she was just trying to work her way back up to the feet. But Calder was able to keep her from getting back up. So here you can see that. So now she's trying to get up against the fence and wall walk. Again, it has the underhook, has a butterfly hook here. But Calderwood's going to do a decent job of keeping her from getting back up. And as a result, Maia's eventually going to settle on just fighting off of her back, seeing if she can throw some submission attempts up and seeing if that's actually going to be a decent chance for her to earn a victory here. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So here, this is more of her just generally fighting off of her back. Has this underhook here, trying to get to her side, but ends up settling for an omoplata attempt initially. So she has this underhook. She's going to bring her right arm around, clasp her hands together, and try to push Calderwood's head away so she can swing her leg around. Now, part of the reason why she didn't actually go for the omoplata is because Calderwood's elbow was bent inwards here, so she wasn't able to scoop around and actually get Calderwood's elbow on the outside of her hip. So you can see, here's the grip right here. So we actually do see at least an early attempt at a submission here, or at least trying to set up a position where she can get to a submission. But it does look as though she's starting to look for an omoplata at this point with 2:07 left in the round. So it's working here. Calderwood's fairly patient. Yet now at this point, Maia does have a decent angle on her, and this is going to be an issue for Calderwood for the rest of the round, is that Maia was very successful in cutting angles on her. Typically, you want to be squared up with your opponent's hips here. Obviously, Calderwood's hips are down here facing forward. Maia's hips are off to the side and then facing off to the side as well, so that gives Maia a chance to attack. But for the most part, Calderwood keeps that elbow bent inward, and Maia is not going to be able to get the omoplata here. And eventually Maia's going to give up and almost sort of like gets herself in a bit of a mirror lock position. Not that Calderwood was going to finish from the top. It's kind of interesting to see the angle here on Maia's elbow as it sort of looks like a mirror lock. But at this point, she realizes that the omoplata is not going to be there and starts scooping over the top. And this is a setup that she used a couple times. Never really threw up an armbar from it, but this is a really basic and really common setup for armbars, especially in MMA when they have the gloves on. You can scoop over top of the gloves and kind of keep their wrist stuck in there. But when you scoop over both wrists, or even if you scoop over one wrist, it makes it easy for you to swing your hips around and go for an armbar. The downside is that it's not that difficult of a attempt, or it's not that difficult of a setup to read, and a lot of times people are going to be able to defend it. So here, again, scoops over top of both, and it's going to want to cut an angle again. You can see Joanne Calderwood pressing with her knee in here as well to push on the leg. And part of that is that once Jennifer Maia is able to open up, assuming Calderwood keeps the pressure in here, she can actually slide her knee through and start to attempt to pass off of that. And that's part of the reason why Jennifer Maia is not going to feel too comfortable here just yet. So throws a couple punches, and then just goes back to full guard. So now we've got about 1:37 left on the clock here. As far as when the actual armbar came, there was a good amount of time where not a whole lot was going on here. It's just Maia throwing some punches off of her back. Calderwood looking to land some ground and pound, making a bit of a mistake here where she gets her elbow across the center line, and Maia tries to threaten it, but Calderwood gets back to the far side. Again, when you're on top, the biggest no-no that you can have is to have your elbow go across the center line of your opponent. So the center line would sort of be their belly button. So if it goes across, that gives them a chance to attack arm bars. They can do a lot of different attacks from there, but an arm bar is a very common attack once your elbow across the center. So we see some more action here, some more punches from the bottom, some more elbows. Again, jiu-jitsu wise, not a whole ton's being set up just yet. So I'm going to skip ahead a little. Again, you can see Jennifer Maya's scooping over the top, trying to scoop above that, or scoop just below the glove, just so she can control the wrist and start looking to swing for some arm bars again. Lets it go right here. Again, looks to scoop over top. Calderwood's going to pull her wrist back. But here you're really seeing Jennifer Maya look to lay a trap and then try to swing the legs around eventually and attack for an armbar. So it's not as though Calderwood wasn't aware that Maya was going to be looking to submit her off of her back. It's more so that Calderwood was just kind of looking to keep her posture low, just play defense for the most part and try to land a couple shots here and there. But Maya was doing a pretty good job every time that Calderwood would bring her arm across center line to start to threaten with something and force Calderwood to have to straighten it up. But this is going to be what actually sets up the armbar here finally. So again, Maya's going to throw another punch off of her back here. But this far tricep grip that she's using, so she's using her left arm to reach across to grab the tricep of Calderwood's left arm going across. Switches back so that over the top grip isn't quite as low on the wrist here. But at this point, she's actually going to swing her hips around and go for the armbar. Swings it. Now, if you actually look at this freeze frame right here, what it tells you a couple of things. So for one, Joanne Calderwood, not as quick to defend this as you would have expected her to be, especially since this wasn't the first time that Maya was indicating that she was going to be looking for an armbar. Wasn't necessarily the best setup, wasn't the tightest setup. At this point, it looks as though her elbow is right around the hip line, so if she pulls her elbow back really quickly here, she's probably going to be able to get out. Also, a lot of space here. Typically, you want to be a lot tighter if you're Jennifer Maya going for the armbar, but again, for Maya, just attacking is okay. It ends up working out, so it's not as though you can take too much credit away from her, but it's not as though this was the slickest armbar you're ever going to see. It was a fairly basic setup, but sometimes the basics are all you need here. So Calderwood doesn't really pull her arm out here like you would expect her to, and doesn't take advantage of all the space here on the attempt. A little bit slow to react to it. And as a result, Maya's going to be able to come across here and get the leg in front of Calderwood's face. It looks as though she has control of the elbow here as well. So at this point, Calderwood's going to want to stay heavy. For Calderwood, what you don't want here is you don't want either to be extended out back this way where your arm can be straightened, or to have Jennifer Maya end up bellying down and going for a belly down armbar. So you want to keep Maya from extending. So if you can keep her crunched up in here in this crunched position, that's where you want to be. And then you just kind of want to slowly pull your elbow out until your elbow is free of the hip line. And at that point, you should mostly be good. You got to be worried about some attacks in there. Sometimes people look to switch to a triangle and throw that leg around. They might look for an omoplata, but the armbar is the most pressing issue here, and that's the one that needs to be addressed. So here, doing a decent job of keeping Maya crunched up. Maya's starting to extend at this point. And a nice little detail here. In theory, this is the type of thing that if you do it in the gym, you're going to have a lot of training partners who hate you, but oftentimes it is effective at getting out of an armbar. The problem is that you also have to maintain your balance here as well. And it seems like how this position moved forward, it seems as though Calderwood's really driving forward in this direction rather than driving straight down. And as a result, she's going to get turned over, or is going to get pushed forward here in this direction here towards the cage. So in theory, once you've got your opponent like this is not an easy position to finish an armbar from. You would think if you can stay heavy, if you can drop your hips down a little bit more as well, which is going to put more pressure on Jennifer Maya's head as well, you're going to be able to pull your arm out. You're going to be able to get that elbow free. You'll escape the position, and there's a good chance that from here you're also going to be able to pass off of it too. So not necessarily a bad defense by Calderwood. It's just more so that her weight distribution wasn't where it needed to be. And so as a result, she's leaning in, but she's also sort of leaning forward. And now she's got a post with her hand as her weight is all the way forward here, and her arm's starting to get extended a little bit. So we keep moving forward. And this is a really important thing to watch here. With the armbar, if in MMA, it can be a little bit different, at least with the men. If there's a cup, sometimes the cup can be used as a fulcrum. So even if your elbow is past the hip line, sometimes there can be some trouble. There was that famous Frank Mir versus Tim Sylvia situation where I think Mir was using a steel cup and popped Tim Sylvia's forearm because he was able to use that as a fulcrum. But typically with an armbar, especially if there are no cups involved, which there wouldn't be for these ladies here, if your elbow is free or if your elbow is not controlled by the hip line, you're going to be okay, or you should be okay for the most part. And at this point, it's sort of hard to tell where the elbow is at, but at the very least, even if the elbow is like right about here, it's very close here. And at this point, both of these girls need to be focused on the elbow line. So Maya needs to be focused on trying to pull the elbow back in. Calderwood needs to be focused on getting that elbow the rest of the way out. So what was surprising to me about the way that Calderwood defended here is that it seemed as though she was prioritizing just getting her head free and fighting off these legs rather than getting her elbow free. And really, you have to focus on getting that elbow free first, because without the elbow, the armbar is really not going to be a major concern for you. And you have to prioritize the submission that's at hand rather than trying to set yourself up for the best position once you presumably get out. Because if you don't properly concern yourself with that armbar, if you don't properly defend it, you're not getting out. You're not going to have to worry about that next part. So making sure that your elbow is free is a key detail here. And I feel like Calderwood is mostly out of this armbar at this point, and she just doesn't put the effort into getting that elbow free, or just doesn't put the effort needed to get that elbow free. So here it looks like she kind of pulls it out, and Herzog, I think, is the ref here. His head's sort of in the way. Don't need it that big. So here you can see Maia's pulling the arm back in. Another interesting thing here is what Joanne Calderwood is doing with her right leg. It seems like at this point there are a few different options she can have. She can try to get underneath Maia's chin and just sort of kick it out and extend her head back. What I would probably be doing here is I'd be trying to pull the leg back in and trying to fight the hands with the foot. Just if you can knock a hand off really briefly, that might give you the time to pull your elbow out. But instead she's just squeezing and sort of squeezing her arm in place too, which is sort of odd. It just seems like she's just kind of squeezing her legs here together. I don't know what the idea of that would be. It's not as though it's going to help her get out of this, but that's what she was doing. Again, she's focusing on pushing the leg away, and it seems like she's kind of close here. But again, the elbow is the biggest detail here. It's not just the leg. The leg is one of those things that you're focused on once you've already given up the arm and you're just trying to make a last-ditch effort. But it really seems like more could have been done with the legs here to try to defend. More could have been done in that brief moment to try to get the elbow free, and now she's sort of in a tough spot. Doesn't quite clear her head here. You get an adjustment here from Maia, and now at this point, elbow is controlled. Calderwood's just in a really bad position here, and again, she's not doing anything with the legs to fight the hands. Even still doesn't try to kick away at the arm. Seems like that at least could have been something that she tried, and I don't know whether or not it would be successful in this case, but that's definitely an option that you should try to go to at this point. So again, is going to try to kick off the fence and roll her way out of it. Meanwhile, Maia's just going to focus on getting full control of that elbow and starting to extend on the arm. So elbow's fully in control now. You see the elbow right here, hips are down here. So at this point, she's got the leverage to get the finish. Straightens it out. It's going to tuck it underneath her armpit, I believe, as well. Meanwhile, Calderwood's trying to roll along the fence to get her way out of here. Isn't able to. The leg's in the way as well. So wasn't successful in defending the leg, even though that's what she was focusing on earlier. Yep, there we go, underneath the armpit. And now you got the full extension and you get the tap as well. And with that, Jennifer Maia, it looks as though has earned a title shot against Valentina Shevchenko. Shevchenko said that she wanted the fight in the post-fight press conference. Dana White said that he felt as though this earned a title fight for Jennifer Maia, so that's going to be the fight that we get next. On the feet, I don't see Jennifer Maia giving Valentina Shevchenko too much trouble. On the ground, I mean, it looks as though she's active off her back. A lot of basic attacks, nothing wrong with basic. It's basic for a reason. You're not going to teach people stuff that doesn't work on day one. You're going to teach them stuff that does work and stuff that's relatively easy. But with that being said, I don't know that I see her giving Valentina Shevchenko too much trouble off of her back, but at least in this fight, did a good job of switching through multiple attacks, did a good job of using attacks that make it difficult for the person on top to land ground and pound, whether you're controlling both arms at the same time like she was when she was looking for the arm bars earlier, whether you're cutting an angle on someone and attacking their forearm and starting to look for a shoulder lock. She's got decent attacks off of her back that make it tough to ground and pound. And in this case, with Joanne Calderwood, whose specialty is more so in the stand-up than it is on the ground, that was enough for her to set up a decent armbar and eventually find a finish.